Hello, welcome to another generic commentary channel. Today, in our modern society, it's not uncommon to hear conversations around gender and sexuality and transgender individuals. You may have heard some debate over things like transgender people participating in sports or around the proper age or earliest age that one can transition to another gender. But one thing you have not heard of is Elagabalus, who was the emperor of Rome for about 4 years. This former Roman emperor has gotten into the news lately because our friends across the pond have a museum called the North Hertfordshire Museum, which has a display of coins bearing the likeness of elagabalus, and the information around this display has now been changed to refer to the emperor with she/her pronouns. This is because of several documents in which the emperor wore women's clothing, preferred to be called a lady, and preferred that feminine versions of words be used when describing him. There is also an account in which the emperor is said to have sought out a surgeon who could change his genitalia or give him female genitalia. Of course, with the ancient medicine, this search was unsuccessful. But given this information, it certainly seems that if Elagabalus had been alive today, he would have transitioned into a woman. The North Hertfordshire Museum states that it's their policy to use the pronoun that any individual would have used themselves, or whatever pronoun in retrospect is appropriate. And they argue that from these documents, Elagabalus most likely preferred feminine pronouns. And I would say it's actually maybe reasonable to speculate that this could have been accurate, given that these documents are accurate. However, a Cambridge professor of classics argues that these documents are probably not factual accounts and are rather hit pieces, in a sense, to paint the emperor as being effeminate. Elagabalus was Syrian and a member of a strange religion from the Roman perspective, and many Roman citizens did not like this individual, and so they crafted stories about Elagabalus to paint him as an effeminate man, unsuitable for the role of Roman emperor. The professor here argues that it's actually justifiable to use they, them pronouns to refer to someone whose gender is unknown, but that he believes the emperor would have used he, him pronouns. He argues that many portraits and coins show Elagabalus with facial hair and in male garments. Elagabalus was only in power for 4 years until he was assassinated, and was maybe not particularly liked. Again, there's a high likelihood that it seems that Romans had a stereotype of Syrians as being effeminate and wanted to paint the emperor as such. This does make it, at best, inconclusive as to whether or not Elagabalus would have been considered transgender in our modern world. But I think there are really two main takeaways here. First, let's pay attention to this article title from The Guardian, which says, "Was Roman Emperor Elagabalus really trans? And does it really matter?" That last question is actually surprisingly nuanced coming from The Guardian. And I think that's what we can all take away from this. Elagabalus is largely inconsequential given his short reign. I don't think changing the pronouns on a display really matters at all. The second takeaway, though, is that we should be careful to not enforce our modern culture on ancient individuals. It's not unreasonable to argue that elagabalus may have actually been transgender if he had been born in the modern world, but considering the role one's environment has in development, this line of thinking can really lead you anywhere. Using this line of thinking, we could also argue that had elagabalus been born today, his religious beliefs would have differed wildly. Therefore, we can't speak of his religious beliefs with accuracy in retrospect. While being transgender is not wholly a modern and Western idea, for Mediterranean peoples of the time, they did not have the concept that we know of. And I think this ultimately makes it hard to say that elagabalus was definitively trans, and the more historically accurate thing would be to refer to him as a man. That's all I have for you today.